Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today for Delight and Desire. I am Brenda Florida, certified life coach, and I help people break the habits that limit them and block their authentic self-expression. And so that's what we are gathering here for every week at noon Pacific, 3 o'clock Eastern. I am so happy to see Sherry, Bradfield Life Coach, and KBH Coaching. I'm so glad you're here with me. Sorry, it's hard to read these little names, right? In the Instagram live comments. And here's Florentino Selling Teams. Oh, great. So glad you're here. I love having you guys here live with me. What this episode is about today and every week, I want to do this as a weekly show, so to speak, because I know that authentic self-expression and breaking the habits that limit us and keep us from that, it's just easier said than done. It's a great thing to say. It's a great thing to aspire to. It's a great thing to want. I want to break these habits that limit me. I want to live authentic self-expression. But wow, doing that is a whole nother thing. So I'm so glad you're here with me live. Anybody watching on the replay, that's awesome. Just join along and add your comments or questions or DM me. I'm also going to start putting these on YouTube after we do them here live. So give me another week or so and I'm going to create a YouTube playlist that will have all the episodes because that'll make it easier probably for watching past episodes or replays than just trying to find them in my Instagram grid. So anyway, thank you for being here. So here's what's been on my mind. Yeah, thanks, Sherry. It just occurred to me this week. That's something I should do to make this easier. And I really want you all to be sharing this. I would love to create a movement out of this, right? Even in the self-help industry, there can be a tendency to focus on what's wrong or what the obstacles are. And of course, it's important to know what our obstacles are. There's all kinds of different ways to get there, so to speak. And I love focusing on delight and desire as a way to that opening, instead of necessarily what's wrong with my life, what's the problem I need to solve, whatever. How does that intersect with what you desire, with what delights you? Because here's how I feel about delights and desires, because I use those words because they have a lot of energy for me and hopefully they do for you as well. In other words, these are things that are big in the pleasure department, not just something fleeting, something, I don't know, maybe I want a Big Mac, but whatever, that doesn't last, right? Especially after I eat it a lot of times. Not that I have a lot of them, but there are things in our lives that we just do and they're nice and they're enjoyable. Maybe the difference between how enjoyable feels versus delight, or how something nice feels versus desire, because there's just that extra oomph in delight and desire for me. And what I've grown to learn in my own journey and coaching hundreds of people is that really your delights and desires are like a roadmap for you. It's sort of like a blueprint for who you are authentically. Because, and I was having this conversation with a client last week, there's this confusion sometimes, and we don't even know we're confused, in thinking something is authentic for us that is simply a learned, conditioned behavior. It's a coping mechanism. And we've just been doing it so long, it feels like it's us, right? It feels like me. And so then, I translate into, well, that's authentic. That's just who I am. And that's what this client kept saying to me. It was just who I am. And so I asked them, well, do you think that's really who you are? Or is that who you have conditioned yourself to be because of your life experiences? We all get impacted by our life experiences, whether it be trauma. I mean, there's hardly a person who hasn't experienced trauma. I don't know who that person is. So you've probably experienced trauma in your life at some level or another. And even if we want to bring it down off of the big T trauma, there are plenty of things that happen in our lives with our upbringing, our culture, our family systems. My goodness, if you are, Black, brown, indigenous, female, gay, trans, non-binary, anything that puts you outside of a white, privileged, patriarchy-based, capitalistic culture, then you know what it's like to feel like you need to conform or please others or assimilate or pretend to be somebody other than who you are. You've had the natural, unique godliness, divinity of who you are. You've had that shamed, and so any of us that have that sort of relationship with our culture and that's probably projected somewhere also in our family. We've had to learn how to adapt and cope with a world that wasn't cheering us on and accepting us. Okay. But ironically, my client that I was having this conversation with is actually a white man, because I coached plenty of white men. And even though they get to sort of be at the top of the food chain in most all cultures, there is still a conditioning that happens. It doesn't mean he escaped conforming and becoming something a little different than who his authentic expression would be without those coping skills. So our coping skills end up being part of this block to even knowing sometimes what our desires are or what delights us. So we all come to this kind of in a level playing field where we all have things that will limit us. They're habits of thought, right? That's all mindset is habitual thinking about something. So when I say habits, I don't just mean like a physical habit of not getting up early enough in the morning to get your things done and be ready for work on time. Or, I'm not talking about behavioral habits, although sometimes it happens that way. But it all starts with mindset habits. Like I have had a horrific habit of self-judgment. Well, that was probably judgmental anyway to call it horrific, right? So I am really unraveling that habit to let it sort of dissipate, like dissolve out of my life, because that self-judgment keeps me out of authentic self-expression. And the reason why delight and desires are a roadmap there is because everybody's delights and desires are sort of unique in the way that it doesn't mean they're all different, but our personal combination of them is unique to us, just like your body is unique to you, how you look is unique to you. Your desires and delights are unique to you. They are part of your divinity. They're part of your unique expression. And so that is a great lead, a great guide to understanding, well, where do I have patterns and habits in my life that can't support what I desire and what I delight, that are in opposition to it. Like my self-judgment, for instance, is a perfect example of a habit that does not support what delights me and what I desire. So let me give you an example. And I'd love for you to play along with this. And anybody who's on here live, put your answers to this down in the comments. I want you to think about just wildly, with no boundaries or barriers. You don't have to figure out how to pay for it, how to take the time for it, anything. Just let me know what some of your biggest, most audacious, ridiculous delights or desires are. So one of mine is to take a vacation at the Ritz in Paris. I have wanted to do this for years. I follow them on Instagram. I love their pictures and posts. I want to stay at the Ritz in Paris. That is a desire I have. Now, what gets in the way of it? My judgment that comes from my culture, my religion, my family. Like, I get it. I get where this comes from. That is materialistic, that wanting something that expensive, that extravagant is materialistic. And so in and of itself, a sin would be the language of my culture religiously. That would be a sin. Well, who wants to sin? So right away, that judgment that sure started outside of me, we could say, in my culture with my family. But then I unfortunately internalized it. As kids, we do most things. We internalize our surroundings. We internalize the messages of those around us, who are put in a position of authority, our teachers, our churches, ministers, all kinds of things. It could be, through our parents and family. Oh, ride a horse in a full gallop. I love that. That's a good one. I also have a big desire to ride a horse on a beach. That's a big one for me. And there's not tons of places. I mean, compared to the whole world, I suppose there's a lot, but it's not necessarily that easy of a thing to find because a lot of beaches won't allow horses on them. But anyway, I know several that do. And so that's a big thing for me. I don't have to necessarily go in a full gallop. So that's a great example. So Sherry and I have a similar desire, but it's not the same. Like, each of our desires are unique to us in some way. Even somebody else who wants to go vacation at the Ritz as a desire is going to do it in a little different way than I do it. And so I love looking at that as a blueprint. Like, this is the opening to knowing what our authentic self-expression is. Yeah. Oh, in Cabo. Oh, that's great, because I'm not terribly far from there. I could combine that with one of my other desires, which is an all-inclusive, a very high-end, all-adult, all-inclusive, beach resort vacation. That's probably my next thing before the Ritz. But at any rate, when you think of particularly these really big, what feels to you like kind of an outrageous desire, then I wonder if that doesn't trigger for you something that starts to move you away from it, like my self-judgment of, oh, I'm just being materialistic. And then I can get into my practical part, because my judgment likes to morph itself into, let's be practical, Brenda. Is that in the budget? Can we see that fitting in the budget? How, it's very expensive, like blah, 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 that diminish my desire and make me feel like pulled away, more separate from my desire. It seems farther away from me, less possible. So those things, and Sherry, I don't know if you feel comfortable to share this. Any of you who would rather share your answers to these questions with me in a DM, feel free to do that, because maybe it feels too personal to put out here in the Instagram universe. I get that, especially if it's your audacious desire. You may not feel safe enough to put that out there. I get that. It's vulnerable to say what we desire. It's sort of in today's world of easy criticism, particularly on a platform like this, it can be very self-loving and self-protective to not put that audacious desire out in the open, right? You want to sort of protect that and keep that for places and people who will support you in that, and that there isn't a risk of shame or criticism or poo-poo, well, yeah, sure, so would I, whatever, that automatically judges and diminishes your desire. You don't want to set yourself up for that until you're so comfortable with it, nobody can bump you off of it. Like, that's the reason I shared the vacation at the Ritz, because somebody can hop on here and say that's the most selfish, ridiculous thing, and how could I even consider that when there are starving children in the world? And that's okay. My desire is anchored enough in me. I'm unapologetic enough about it to be able to hold on to it in the face of that. But there is a precious protective period for our desires where we do not need to show them to anyone in the world that we might risk judgment of them. So your fear is that you would fall off this horse and break some bones, which would be stupid at your age. Yeah, that is a great, not great, but that's a super solid example of how our limiting beliefs take us off of our desires. And it doesn't mean we have to, I'm not a big fan of the idea of getting rid of, that's awful, stop that. So, I mean, in a way, that's a way you could think of it, but that's why I like the word dissolving. And maybe that even works in how I help people break habits. They break the habit by dissolving that mindset, that thought that isn't serving them. So something like, so Sherry, if you go, riding horses, I don't even know how old you are, but I don't think you're as old as I am. But anyway, riding horses at a full gallop at whatever age you are, means you're going to break your bones and that'll be stupid. Is that really true? I mean, first of all, it can't be really true because we don't know that you would fall off. It hasn't happened, right? So we don't even know that you would fall off and break your bones. And if you did fall off and break a bone, would that be stupid? Or would that be well fucking worth it to have this audacious desire in your life, right? Our thoughts, our mindset, most of our habits are really anchored in our thoughts. So almost all habit breaking is thought breaking. Even when it's a habit that is a physical, expression, I'm avoiding this, I'm not doing this, I am doing, I'm overeating, I'm over exercising, I'm whatever that is a habit that you can associate with physical doing. That habit, that doing starts, 66. Okay, so we're close. I'm 62. That habit starts with a thought process that gets you into that physical manifestation of it. And so even if, Sherry, you have, a physical limitation or something, that the doctor highly doesn't recommend, you riding a horse at a full gallop, okay? Let's just even say that's true. Doctors say a lot of things that don't end up being the case, or that, again, doing something that is in our own pure self-expression is well worth it, to take the risk. Or you decide to modify the desire in a way that you can better express it today. So desires are not about going into magical thinking and just like, I don't know, pretending it's not gonna, something, isn't gonna happen. Like if I have brittle bones and I want to go ride a horse at a full gallop, desire doesn't make me ignore the fact that that might not be a really smart thing for me, but I can take that desire and say, okay, so what is the best way for me to express this now? Because it's still the blueprint. It's still there. There's a million people I could ask what your most audacious desire is, and they're not going to have Sherry's answer. They're not going to have my answer. So it's still pointing to your authentic self. But 9 times out of 10, probably 99 out of 100, there's not a true limitation that keeps us from our desire. It's an imagined limitation. It's the thought habit of judgment. It's the thought habit of unworthiness. It's the thought habit of not good enough yet. You haven't done enough yet. You haven't earned that yet. You can't do that. You're not, young. And I mean, the whole too old for it thing is huge. And, we're just now, at least in Western culture here in the United States, at least with people I follow, over the last several years has been a big uptake in the research, and therefore, books that have been written, TV shows on the sort of myth of growing older, how so many things that we've just attributed to, well, that's about growing older and there's nothing you can do about that, are not actually true about our bodies, medically, physically, neurologically, all the things. A super fun show on that is, it was done by National Geographic, so it's streaming on Disney Plus and maybe somewhere else, is a show called Limitless with Chris Hemsworth, handsome Chris Hemsworth. And they put him, it's sort of they put him through a bunch of challenges to prepare him for aging and maintaining his vitality. And it's more complicated than that, but really, really interesting. It starts to undo a lot of these cultural ideas of, oh, well, that's, just what I have to expect, these aches and pains. I'm, not getting any younger. I'm getting older. Or the opposite. I also coach a lot of young people, from teenagers to, early mid 20s, whatever. And so a lot of times there's a belief there that they're too young. They don't have the experience. They don't have, whatever. And for whatever it is you desire, there is someone who matches whatever you feel like your limitation is. Like Sherry, there's somebody way older than you riding horses at a full gallop in probably worse health than you do have, because there's always somebody breaking that barrier, right? There's somebody who has started out poorer in life than I did from a financial standpoint, who was raised with the belief that all that, money in abundance was wrong and sinful and materialistic and blah, 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 all the judgments about wealth, that overcame that and had their vacation at the Ritz. Like there's always somebody who has already broken that barrier. And if not, you could be the first one. But usually we can find somebody who has. And so we can start to unravel those habits of thought that make us believe that we can't have our desires, or we can't have what delights us, or that there's something just innately sort of sinful, materialistic, selfish about them. And so we shouldn't pursue them. So that's what happens to all my people pleasers, everyone out there who resonates with being a people pleaser. You've been taught overtly and covertly that whatever it is you desire and delight in is not as good as or as important as what somebody else desires or delights in. Because when we are raised and conditioned and take on all those coping skills of a people pleaser, then everything we want comes secondary to what the people around us, the people we love, the people we work with, the people we care about, whatever they want and need is way more important. And so ours all gets set on the back burner. And so that is just people pleasing. Sure, it has a lot of doing in it, but the habit starts with a thought process, with the belief that if you're not serving or if you're not putting people first, you're not lovable, or you're not a good person, or you're not going to be loved, you're not going to be accepted, you're not going to be successful, whatever it is. And so all of those habits start with a thought. And so what I'm doing all the time, even in this, right, little 30-minute broadcast each week on Tuesdays at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, is to start to break those habits of thought that keep us away from what delights us and what our desires are. So, Sherry, I wonder, and anybody else who's on here live, or if you're, watching the replay, please drop in the comments or, DM me if that idea, that concept of there's really a pattern of thoughts or a habit of thoughts that are judging or taking you away, telling you can't have your desire or what delights you. And it's just usually more obvious when we go to the bigger ones, when we go to the ones that feel more audacious to us. It is a lot of times easier to feel and see these blocks. And so I wonder, Sherry, if any of that, you're a coach yourself, so you may have this awareness already really clearly for you. But hell, just because I'm a coach doesn't mean I always get it. Or notice how it's, something is limiting me. Yeah. And the large things, right? So now what I've discovered on the smaller things is that the smaller things for me usually fit in two categories. Either for whatever reasons, I, broke my habit of thought for that thing because whatever that desire or delight was, it was small enough, it didn't trigger all that. We'll just call it, for me, we'll just narrow it down to judgment and all the many ways that manifests. Whereas the big ones really trigger it. But the small ones, either I get them, I do them because it didn't get triggered, or I'm not getting them, and the trigger of that judgment, the obstacle of that judgment is so sort of subtle or nuanced to me that I don't realize that's what it is. When I go to the big things, it's easier for me to realize, oh my gosh. I did it today on something I was working with, and I was in meditation, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait a minute. I'm totally judging this thing. And I hadn't thought about it that way before. I'd thought about judgment in regard to it from different angles. But anyway, just today it hit me at a deeper level, I guess we'll say, of like, wow, this is just judgment. I'm just judging this thing I desire. So as we wrap up today, I would love for you to do two things, and I'd love for you to DM me and share them with me if you feel comfortable with it, or drop it here in the comments. But follow along with Sherry and I and tell us an audacious desire that you have, and then what feels like the obstacle to it. And see if that obstacle, if you can get that to a thought like Sherry did of, oh, I'm going to, fall and break my bones and that'll be totally stupid, right? Somebody my age shouldn't be doing this kind of thing. Somebody way older than you has done it, whatever it is. So see if you can pinpoint those, because the awareness of them, the owning of your own desire, and the awareness of the thought that is your obstacle to it, so to speak, is really powerful. Now, the next powerful step is undoing that, unraveling that, dissolving that, breaking that thought habit And, so that's what I'm here for all day, every day. So I am open right now. I have some spots open for one-on-one clients. So if you're interested in exploring working with me and letting me help you and give you tools, way more than I can do here in a 30-minute broadcast, to break your specific habits, how they show up for you, again, where we all have sort of limiting beliefs we can put under certain umbrellas, like I'm not good enough, or I'm too old or too young or whatever. We all sort of have our nuances, our unique version of that. Like we all have fingerprints, right? And they all, to the naked eye, look the same, but they're not. And so your blocks are unique to you in a way, and how the tool you need to get you out of it is not necessarily something you're going to find, in a book. That's what makes, or on a broadcast, that's what makes one-on-one coaching so powerful, is we can dive in and get into those little, nuances of your specific limitations and breaking you through those into an elevated, more authentic self-expression. So just head over to my bio. There's a link to book a 15-minute call, or you can just DM me and tell me you're interested, and we'll set up the call and talk about it. There's no obligation. I'm not going to pressure you, and see if now is the right time and if I am the right coach. And so with that, until next week on Tuesday at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, for Delight and Desire. I am Brenda Florida, signing off, thanking you for being here, thanking you for sharing this. Let's make delight and desire a movement, because the more we focus on it, the more it will show up. Thank you so much, Sherry, for being here and being so faithful. So I love you all. Mwah. Bye-bye.